I was the CEO of a division of Rolls-Royce called the R-Squared Factory, which is Rolls-Royce's artificial intelligence and machine learning business. And I worked at Rolls-Royce from 2017 to 2023. We're talking here about Rolls-Royce, the aerospace power manufacturer. So they make airplane engines, they make small modular nuclear reactors, they make engines for trains and engines for tanks and engines for boats and, lots and lots of power systems. Emerging technology is often commandeered by superpowers to create strategic advantage, whether that's the military complex or whether that's in industrial policy.
What are some of the key lessons or most important lessons that you have learned over the course of time of working and shifting careers?
Technology right now is not a very representative sector in terms of employment. It's probably only about 20% female. It's certainly less than 5% from African extraction, and it's underrepresented in whole swathes of communities.
Hello everyone, welcome to BetterTech. So today we have with me Caroline. Hey there, how are you today?
I'm good, Haseeb. Thank you very much for speaking with me.
So why don't we get started with a brief introduction about yourself, who you are, what you do, and how you have reached where you are today.
Sure. So my name is Caroline Gorski. I'm a technologist and a strategist. And I have worked over the last 30 years really at the intersection between emerging technology and large-scale change. And that might be changes to the way that businesses work, changes to the way that we live our lives, changes to society. And that's really involved getting deeply into thinking about how different waves of emerging technology, starting with the internet, but then moving into mobile technology and then big data and then augmented and virtualized virtual reality technology, and then latterly machine learning and artificial intelligence, how all of those different waves of technology transform the world we live in. And that's what I'm fascinated by. I've worked in very big organizations. I spent some time as the head of Rolls-Royce's artificial intelligence and data analytics business. But I've also worked in very small organizations, in startups, exploring technology and technology change. And I've had time working as well with the government of, multiple governments around the world to think about how technology changes things.
Okay, so thank you very much for the context, certainly very helpful. So you mentioned technologist and strategist, and you have worked on both. What sort of difference you think is between the two, and is there any intersection or overlap between the two?
That's a really interesting question. For me, strategy is all about having a kind of long-term view and looking for trends and patterns as they emerge. So you, as a strategist, you're sort of trying to sense and gather as much information as you possibly can about the world you're in, and then about the world that you might be about to move into, in order to kind of prepare yourself and think about the steps that you're going to take. As a technologist, you're much more focused on, if you like, the here and now and the next immediate step. So, technologists are all about, how do I take the perhaps 5-year time horizon that I can see in front of me and make it a reality, like bring it into the real world today? What skills do I need in terms of software development, in terms of security, in terms of data analytics, in terms of visual rendering, in terms of processing capability, compute power? How do I bring all those things, drag them from the near-term future into reality today? Whereas a strategist is saying, okay, well, what's going to happen in 10 years or 20 years or 50 years? And how do I sort of build building blocks of the technologies that I might have at my disposal in order to create a foundation from which we can face into that longer term future?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, thank you very much for this answer. It's going to help people a lot who are maybe planning to build a career in technology, strategy, and other things. So, from your personal perspective, 2025 has just started. So what are some of your plans and goals for this new year? And how do you see it impacting the world that we live in?
So that's a really big question. I feel like so much has already moved since December 31st to today, like in a month. So many things have been torn up and rewritten, technology strategy in the whole of the USA and China and the UK, and presumably a knock-on effect to other big regions as well. So certainly the world is moving very quickly. And I think one of the things that's fascinating is how technology, particularly kind of emerging technology that ultimately to the internet as its kind of underlying foundational capability, that technology has moved from being sort of something that kids did in garages and something that then everybody started shopping on into real strategic assets for superpowers. And that's, been coming. I mean, and it's not surprising in a sense. I mean, emerging technology is often commandeered by superpowers to create strategic advantage, whether that's the military complex or whether that's in industrial policy. But what you can see now is that really, coming full tilt into the decision making and the thinking of some of the world's biggest powers. So from my perspective, what does that mean for the sorts of work I do? Well, one of the things I'm very interested in through Cerestrial, which is my company that I co-founded with my colleague Manisha Mistry, is when we're thinking about technology careers, right? When we're thinking about how people get themselves into positions of leadership so that they can actually be involved in some of this very important decision making, how do we make sure that that group is fully representative of our world and the experiences that we need it to be representative of? Because the reality is technology, and indeed strategy and finance, but let's stick with technology right now, is not a very representative sector in terms of employment. It's probably only about 20% female. It's certainly less than 5% from African extraction, and it's underrepresented in whole swathes of communities, people from less affluent backgrounds, people who have non-traditional educational pathways, women, people of ethnic minority, LGBTQIA people. All of those groups are underrepresented in the technology communities that are building the future that we are all heading into so fast. And that's a problem if, when you're building that future, you're using large-scale data analytics and machine learning and AI to compound into that future some of the biases that already exist in today's world. And so through Cerestrial, we are actively supporting individuals who don't necessarily see other people like them, further on in their careers in the technology industry or in any industry, but, it's particularly prevalent in technology. And we're helping to support them to build development pathways and to really achieve the potential that their talent should be able to allow them to deliver into the world. I think when I see the scale and the speed at which very big kind of geopolitical decisions that are predicated on technology are being made, I want the people who are feeding into those decisions to come from as broad a spectrum of experience and humanity as they can, because otherwise we end up in a world where all of the decisions only get made by a very narrow group of, frankly, white old men. And I don't feel comfortable with that.
So, I mean, you touched upon the company that you have started with your colleague and everything. But previously, I mean, you were working at a very large group, right? So what motivated you to take that leap of faith, and how is it coming along?
That's a really good question. So, previously I was the CEO of a division of Rolls-Royce called the R-Squared Factory, which is Rolls-Royce's artificial intelligence and machine learning business. And I worked at Rolls-Royce from 2017 to 2023, and it was amazing. I mean, it's an extraordinary company to work for. Here we're talking here about Rolls-Royce, the aerospace power manufacturer. So they make airplane engines, they make small modular nuclear reactors, they make engines for trains and engines for tanks and engines for boats and, lots and lots of power systems. But it's an extraordinary company. It's so deeply technologically gifted. Everybody has 2 or 3 PhDs and is capable of a really extraordinary engineering and science. And so I was hugely lucky and thrilled to work there, and thrilled to be bringing some new techniques to bear and to help an organization, because Rolls-Royce is 140 odd years old, help an organization of that degree of heritage actually kind of take its steps into the next phase of what needed to happen. But during that experience, that's really, I suppose, what honed these concerns that I've just been expressing about the narrowness of the experience field for the development of machine learning and AI as solutions for industry. We worked incredibly hard over those 7 years to try to create as inclusive a data science community as we could, including, hiring people who did not have traditional academic backgrounds, who did not come from maths and statistics degrees, and cross-training them, understanding that the cultural change we were trying to help support was as important as the technological solutions, and bringing people in who, had psychology backgrounds or had backgrounds in communication or had arts degrees, for example. And in doing that, I think it just made us realize that this is a huge issue and you can't solve it inside a single organization. And so that's really where the sort of germ of Cerestrial was born, in understanding that if we profoundly believe that the shifts we have made over the last decade into machine learning being deployed pretty much universally in the systems that we use and in the ways that we engage with the world, certainly in the Western world or in the kind of more advanced economies. If we believe that shift is not going to be reversed, right? It's one way. Then we need to make sure that the way that we are learning how to live in that new world is something that we're happy to do. And I think the best way to do that is by making sure everybody's voices, or as many voices as possible, can be included in building that new world. And so that, for us, was what Cerestrial is about. In terms of the timing, I mean, I am someone who has gone from big corporate to small startup to big corporate to small startup. I'd done a big job at Rolls-Royce building the R-Squared factory out. And I wanted to take another step, or I wanted to do another thing that was really going to make a difference. And that's where Cerestrial comes from.
Yeah. So, and also in Rolls-Royce, you have been working in bigger teams, competent people, just like you said, right? Where everyone is sort of ahead of their game in terms of the innovation and everything. So normally in your experience, when you have people coming into your team, how do you basically have them thinking on their feet all the time and be innovative with whatever they're proposing? How do you foster that culture?
The biggest thing, I think, is about feeling safe, is about psychological safety and having that safety to experiment and to know that it's okay to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. I mean, it's a much talked about thing. The reality is, particularly in data science is an experimental and an iterative methodology, right? So you try stuff out and then you see what you learn from trying stuff out, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't work. So we worked very hard to, not just in my team, actually, in Rolls-Royce, but across the whole organization. At one point, we put 4,500 of Rolls-Royce's sort of senior and middle management through an agile methodological training, because we needed to show them, how does agile as a methodology work, and what does it mean to have a kind of, starting from the very inside of the onion and then kind of just building it layer by layer by layer, but not taking 6 months to do a kind of full project definition scoping exercise and have every T crossed and every I dotted, but instead, take some small steps, try some things out, get some proof points, find out what works and what doesn't work, reset, do a retrospective, go back to your backlog, put some more in. So that kind of software engineering approach is not something that is necessarily very well understood in traditional physical engineering, partly because traditional physical engineering, if you have that very experimental approach with physical engineering, quite often you make some very expensive mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes could be, really quite damaging to the safety of a product. Whereas in software engineering, when you make those mistakes, generally speaking, you can recover from them quite quickly. So it was really interesting to do that. But part of that was about helping teams understand that experimentation is a process that can be used to help innovation happen faster. And by freeing yourself to not have to know all of the answers and just kind of focusing on, okay, I'm testing this thing through these sprints in order to learn this. And if it goes wrong, we're going to stop and we're going to, go back to the beginning and start again. And no one's going to be told that they've made a career damaging error. That's going to be fine. That's really important. And it's about making that space safe for experimentation. It's not a free-for-all. You still have guardrails, right? You still need rules that set the outside parameters, particularly when you're talking about safety critical or safety affecting processes. But it's about liberalizing within those guardrails and making it possible for experimentation to happen much more quickly.
And what sort of are some of the key lessons or most important lessons that you have learned over the course of time of working and shifting careers from enterprises to startups and vice versa?
So when you do those personality test things that they always make you do, those psychometric tests that big organizations quite often have you do, you end up with a profile and it says, you're this sort of person or you're this sort of leader. One of the indexes that often gets used is a risk index, right? A risk aversion index, which basically says how comfortable are you with risk? And I am always right off the chart. I'm perfectly comfortable with risk. That's partly because I think I always have had this sense that my favorite way of being is a bit like a cat that's jumped up just too high a wall, right? So the cat's front paws are on the top of the wall and its back legs are desperately scrabbling to try and get it over the wall, right? Because this, that's me. I liked to jump at things that are just a little bit too high and then muscle my way over them. So actually, weirdly, one of the things I have learned that's been really important because what happens when you're like that in your career is the more senior you get, the bigger the impact of your risk taking is on other people.
Exactly.
Because when you're really junior, you can chuck yourself at as high a wall as you want, and the only person who's going to fall off is you. Right? And then you just pick yourself up and dust yourself off and it's fine. But when you're leading teams and you throw yourself at too high a wall, you've got all these people who are reliant on you, who need you, who are following you. So one of the things I have learned as I progressed through my career is how do I get better at managing my own energy and my own resilience and my own, ability to spring, but also how do I build a team around me that can act as an unfair advantage, right? That can be an amazing springboard and actually, get more of us over the wall. And so that, for me, is almost the difference between being a kind of professional, an individual professional, and being a leader. It's about how do you create an energetic structure as a leader that means that you can all tap into that dynamism and energy to move yourselves forward, as opposed to just doing it for yourself.
Right. So before we close, what advice would you like to give to young professionals, entrepreneurs, managers, or anyone who is listening to this?
I think I would have two pieces of advice that would, I hope, complement each other. The first is always be curious, right? Always, never, ever stop asking questions and stop exploring. And if that means you have to, learn a new piece of software or read a book about something that you didn't understand about before or whatever it is, just keep that curiosity, those neurons that fire curiosity, moving across your brain. That's the first thing. And then I think the second thing is be kind to yourself. That isn't always a message that comes out in kind of enterprise leadership or startup leadership coaching, but you only have one life and there really isn't an awful lot of point in not enjoying the one you have. So be kind to yourself, accept that you're going to fail, accept that you're sometimes not going to make it over the wall and you are going to slide down like a pancake with your face kind of like falling off to the side, and just go, okay, that didn't work. I need to take some time out and I need to take stock and I need to think about it and plan, and maybe I need to go and hunker down, in the sun or under my duvet for a couple of days and figure out what I'm going to do next. And awareness of self-kindness is what makes it possible to keep making those bold ambitious, risky decisions that,
Right.
sometimes really pay off.
So Caroline, thank you very much for your time today. I truly appreciate it. So it was more of a generic conversation about
Yeah.
learning about yourself more. So I think we are going to have a more in-depth session with you regarding AI, machine learning, data science in general, as well as seeing like how you implemented that at Rolls-Royce, what sort of difference it brought, and then have that shared with the audience as well. So I look forward to hosting you again. Till that
Super.
time, you have a very nice time and take good care of yourself.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Haseeb.